He looked up at him in the restored sunroom, late light falling across her face, and asked the only question that had ever truly mattered. "Are you staying?" And he did not answer with words right away. He stepped back once, to the open doorway where the porch step was visible, the same board that had been pulling from its frame the night she stood on it with a suitcase and no destination, and he pressed his boot firmly down on it. It did not shift. It held. He came back to her and said quietly, "I do not brace things I plan to leave." And something in her chest that had been clenched for weeks, through the legal threats and the sleepless nights and the slow, frightening work of remembering who she was, finally released. She stepped into him, forehead against his chest, and he held her the way he held everything worth holding, steady, deliberate, without apology. The house around them was no longer wounded, and the woman who had once stood in a doorway asking if she was still worth looking at had stopped asking, because she already knew the answer had never been about how she looked. It had always been about what she was made of, and what she was made of had held through everything.
Some sounds carry weight that ordinary noise never does. A door slamming hard enough to rattle a kitchen window is not just a door closing, it is a signal. Nathan Cross had learned, after 3 years of living 10 feet from the same neighbor, that houses speak if you are willing to listen. The groan of a settling floorboard, the way a screen door bounced once when someone left in a hurry versus twice when they left in anger. That afternoon, the sound that came through the wall between their properties was neither accidental nor quiet. It was final. He was at the kitchen table reviewing material estimates when the slam arrived. He set down his pencil. Then came the second sound, wheels. Plastic wheels dragging across worn timber boards. Someone pulling a suitcase with no destination in mind. He stepped outside. Across the narrow strip of yard dividing their homes, Clara Ashford stood in her doorway. She was not rushing, she was not weeping. She simply stood, arms folded tightly across her ribs, as though she alone was holding herself upright. She wore a loose cream blouse, one sleeve fallen just below her shoulder. Her posture held something suspended between defeat and endurance. He noticed the top step beneath her feet before he said a word. It had been pulling away from the frame for weeks, the old nail backing out slowly each time someone used it. He had been meaning to mention it. She looked at him directly, not at the street, not past him. "Nathan," she said. Her voice arrived the way thin paper sounds when bent too quickly, strained but not broken. The air carried something warm from inside her house, vanilla absorbed into plaster and wood over years of ordinary living. "He left," she said. "David left, for someone younger." She paused. "Do you think I'm still worth looking at?" He did not move toward her. He did not rush past the question. He looked at the loose step beneath her feet, then back up at her face. "That board under you was pulling away from the frame," he said. "One wrong step and it will give way completely." Her lips parted. Something moved in her expression, not amusement, not frustration, recognition. "You noticed the board," she said softly. "I notice what is about to fail," he answered. She did not move. The suitcase sat behind her, handle still extended. The sky had begun shifting toward the deep blue that arrives before a serious storm. He had checked the forecast that morning. It was going to be significant. "Storm shutters," he said, glancing at the side of her house. "Did David handle those?" She looked back at the house the way someone looks at a place they no longer fully recognize. "He handled everything," she said. "Then we start there," Nathan replied, already moving toward the step. He crouched, pressed his thumb against the board, and felt it flex under light pressure. The nail had nearly backed out entirely. One hard step at the wrong angle and it would split clean through. He pulled a flat tool from his back pocket and began clearing the old hardware. Clara watched his hands work without speaking. "You fix things," she said finally. "I fix things that are worth fixing," he replied. Down on the street, a black sedan rolled to the curb and stopped. The question she had asked, the real question beneath the spoken one, remained between them, not forgotten, simply waiting for the right conditions to be answered honestly. The man who stepped out of the sedan carried a clipboard and a thick envelope with the flat efficiency of someone performing a task that had nothing to do with the people involved. He scanned the address numbers and walked toward Clara without hesitation. "Clara Ashford?" he said. "Yes." He extended the envelope. "Legal correspondence." The paper crinkled loudly in the evening air as she opened it. Nathan remained crouched at the step, watching her face change the way a sky changes just before conditions turn. First, stillness. Then, a cold clarity settling in like frost. "What is it?" he asked. She lowered the pages. "David's attorney filed an emergency petition. They're citing the storm warnings, claiming the property has visible hazards and requesting a court-ordered fast sale before any proceedings are formally scheduled." She paused. "At distressed pricing." Nathan stood and looked at the house with the practiced eye of someone who had assessed structures for years. The siding needed attention in 2 sections. The porch railing had loosened at the base. The sunroom addition showed weathering around the seal, but the foundation was solid. The load-bearing structure was intact. This was not a collapsing property. It was a neglected one. Those were entirely different things. "That is a pressure strategy," he said, "not a legitimate safety claim." "Can he actually do it?" Clara asked. "He can file anything, but the argument requires visible deficiencies to hold up in court. Remove the deficiencies, and you remove his foundation." A familiar truck pulled up behind the sedan as it was leaving. Owen Park stepped out in his work clothes and read the scene with the quickness of someone who had spent years reading job sites before walking onto them. "What did I miss?" he asked. Clara held up the papers briefly. "Distressed sale petition. Storm hazard claim." Owen looked at the porch, then at Nathan. "This step has been a problem for weeks," he said. "Not anymore," Nathan replied, finishing the repair. "But we document everything from here forward. Receipts, permits, photographs. Nothing stays informal." Clara folded the papers under her arm and looked at the house, then at both men. "I am not selling," she said. Not dramatically, simply. Owen was already moving toward the loose railing on the left side of the porch, examining the base with a small flashlight. "Core framing looks solid," he said. "This is surface work and deferred maintenance, nothing structural." "That is exactly the argument we need to prove," Nathan said. Clara turned to Nathan with something unreadable in her expression. "What do you charge?" she asked, quietly. "Materials first," he said. "Labor will figure itself out." Owen glanced at him, but said nothing. The sky above the street had gone fully purple now. The wind moved with intention. Nathan could feel the temperature dropping in the specific way that precedes serious weather. Not merely cold, but charged and deliberate. "We have tonight and tomorrow morning before this hits in full. Let us use the time." Clara nodded and went inside to find flashlights. Owen marked the railing work that needed doing before dark. Nathan finished with the step and moved to the shutters on the south side. The question she had asked him still remained unanswered. He had not forgotten it. He simply understood that some answers deserved to be given in safety rather than in the middle of distress. The most honest reply he could offer her required time, and time is one thing he intended to give her. The storm arrived just after 9 with no patience for anything not securely fastened. Rain came nearly sideways. Nathan sat at his kitchen table listening, watching through the window as Clara's backyard bent and recovered under the pressure. He had driven in the last of the storm shutters before dark. Owen had reinforced the loose railing. They had done what they could. Then the sound came. Not ordinary rain percussion, something deeper, a crack that traveled through the ground before it reached the air, the kind that means something large has finally given way. He was out the door before the echo faded.
The oak tree at the rear of Clara's property had split at mid-trunk. A massive limb came down across the sunroom addition, carrying a section of roof with it. Glass scattered across the patio. The frame of the addition had partially collapsed along the northeast corner. He found Clara standing barefoot in her kitchen, cardigan pulled tight, staring through the shattered back wall at the damage. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head once. "Shoes," he said, locating a pair near the entry and sliding them across the tile. "Glass travels farther than it looks." She slipped them on without speaking. Owen arrived 12 minutes later with 2 crew members and a truck loaded with tarps and timber bracing. No confusion, no narrating of steps. They had worked together long enough to move without explaining. The crew covered the open roof section, secured the tarp edges, and assessed the addition frame, while Nathan cut power to the damaged wing at the breaker panel. Clara tried to help. She picked up a bundle of fasteners from Owen's kit, and her hands were not steady. They scattered across the tile. Nathan stepped beside her before she could crouch toward the broken glass. "Put your hand here," he said, guiding her palm to the exposed wall stud in the torn section near the hallway. She pressed her hand flat against the wood. "That is original framing, white oak, probably milled before either of us were born. The storm took the glass and the addition, but the core of this house has not moved." She kept her hand against the wood a moment longer than necessary. Then she looked at him. Something shifted in her expression right then, not dramatically, the way a reading changes on an instrument when you find the true load point, a slight but essential steadying. They worked until 2 in the morning. By then the rain had softened, the tarp was secure, the frame was braced, and every piece of glass had been cleared. Owen's crew loaded the truck and drove away. Owen himself lingered at the doorway with the expression of someone choosing carefully from several things he had decided not to say. Then he left. Nathan and Clara stood in the kitchen. The damage was visible, but no longer threatening. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of people who have worked through something real together, which is entirely different from the silence of people who simply have nothing left to say. "Thank you," she said finally. "Get some sleep," he replied. "Tomorrow will require decisions." He walked back across the narrow yard to his own house. He did not look back, but he stood at his kitchen window for a long time after, watching her lights remain on.
Morning arrived gray and slow, with the light that follows a significant storm. Everything looked slightly rearranged. The oak in Clara's yard had been reduced to its lower half, the split surface pale and raw against the darker surrounding bark. Nathan was reviewing damage photographs when the black sedan returned. This time, David Ashford stepped out himself. He was exactly the kind of man who looked undisturbed by things he had caused. Clean clothes, measured posture, the deliberate presentation of someone who assumed authority over every room he entered. He walked toward Clara's porch with quiet ease. Clara was already outside. She stood on the same porch she had occupied the night before, but nothing about her posture was the same. No suitcase, arms at her sides, chin level. "The storm damage qualifies as an immediate hazard," David said without greeting. "My attorney has the emergency filing ready. The court will move quickly." "Your attorney filed the petition yesterday, before the storm. The timing is worth noting." "The damage alone is sufficient," he said, gesturing toward the rear of the property. Nathan stepped through his front door and came to the edge of his porch. He did not cross onto her property. He simply stood, visible, unhurried, present. David glanced at him. "Is this your contractor?" he asked Clara, shaping the word to carry a specific dismissal. "This is my neighbor," Clara said. Owen's truck turned onto the street and pulled up slowly. He stepped out holding a manila folder. "Permit application is ready to file this morning," Owen said, addressing no one in particular.
Structural assessment is Thursday. Everything is documented under active permitted restoration status. That changes the legal characterization of this property. David looked at Clara. You want to spend money on a property the court will order sold anyway? I want to restore what belongs to me, Clara said, at full value, not your number. He stepped closer. His voice dropped. You are letting other people make your decisions. I am making my own decisions, she replied. That is what is new. He held her gaze, then looked at Nathan with an expression that had abandoned all pretense. You are temporary, he said. Nathan said nothing. He had learned long ago that certain statements are designed purely to produce a reaction. Refusing to provide one is its own form of reply. Clara provided it instead. You should go, she told David. Flat, clear. He left. Owen waited until the sedan turned the corner. That man is not finished, he said. No, I agreed. He will try the inspection route next, file a complaint, trigger a city visit, put hazard language on official record. Then every permit stays airtight. Every repair is logged and photographed. We give him nothing. Clara came down the steps, which no longer made a sound under her weight, and stood between both men on the front walk. Honest assessment, she said. Can this be fully restored? Nathan looked at the house without sentiment. Yes, he said. 3 weeks of steady, sequenced work, but yes. She nodded once. Then we begin today. Owen pulled out his tape measure. Nathan went for his notebook. Clara went inside and returned with coffee for both of them, unprompted. It tasted like someone who had finally decided to stop waiting for things to improve on their own. 3 days into the restoration, a rhythm formed without anyone naming it. Owen and his crew arrived at 7 and left by late afternoon. Nathan stayed longer, fitting new pieces carefully against old ones, the kind of work that values patience over speed. Clara managed the administrative side with surprising focus: permit tracking, inspector scheduling, delivery coordination. She kept everything in a binder she carried whenever she walked the site. On the 4th evening, when the crew had gone, Clara found Nathan in the hallway replacing baseboard trim damaged when the interior wall had cracked during the storm. She leaned against the doorframe and watched without speaking. You do this the same way every time, she said eventually. Do what? Measure, cut, check the fit, adjust, then fix it permanently. He pressed the trim piece against the wall and checked alignment with a small level. That is the correct way to do it. David never worked like that, she said, not with bitterness, more with the tone of someone correctly organizing a fact they had long misread. He made fast, confident decisions. I used to think that was strength. Nathan set the level aside. Speed and confidence are not the same as soundness. She was quiet for a moment. He told me near the end that I had become too settled, she said. He said it like it was a flaw in the design. Nathan finished securing the trim and sat back on his heels. He looked at the work rather than at her. Settled means the foundation has stopped shifting, he said. That is not a flaw. That is what you build on. She looked at the perfectly aligned trim piece. Can I ask you something? She said. Yes. The first night, when I asked if I was still worth looking at, you talked about the porch step. Was that your answer? He turned and looked at her directly. It was part of it. What was the rest? He stood and faced her. The question you were actually asking had nothing to do with how you look, he said. You were asking whether you had value after someone who was supposed to recognize that value had looked away. The answer is always yes. What the looking away reveals is something about the person who stopped, not about what they failed to see. Clara held his gaze. That is a precise way of saying something, she said quietly. I work in precise measurements, he replied. The corner of his mouth moved slightly. She laughed, not performed, not polite, the brief, startled sound of something that had been held tight finally loosening. It changed the quality of the air between them. They ate dinner at her kitchen table that evening. Pasta with an improvised sauce, reckless or creative depending on the outcome. The outcome was good. They talked about the permit inspection and the repair sequence. Then, without deciding to, they talked about other things: her work before the marriage, why he preferred restoration over new construction. She rested her chin in her hand and studied him. "You think about things differently than most people," she said. "Is that a compliment?" "I'm still deciding," she said. He gathered the dishes without being asked. She did not stop him. Outside, the street was quiet. The house around them felt different than it had a week before. Not finished, but no longer wounded in quite the same way.
The city inspector arrived unannounced on Wednesday morning, which was itself a message. Unannounced inspections triggered by complaints are designed less to find problems than to place documentation on record that problems exist. Nathan recognized the tactic immediately. He stepped off the ladder and walked to the front of the house before Clara could reach the door. "Morning," he said to the inspector, a compact man with a city lanyard and a tablet. "Received a complaint regarding unpermitted structural alterations," the inspector said. "All permitted work is posted at the site entrance," Nathan replied. "Permits are on file at the county office. A licensed structural engineer visits Thursday." He paused. "Would you like to walk through the property?" Owen came around from the side of the house and handed the inspector the permit folder without comment. The inspector spent 40 minutes walking the property. He examined the sunroom frame, checked the temporary bracing, photographed the beamwork, and reviewed the documentation against the actual repairs. Inside, Clara stood at the kitchen counter, gripping the edge with both hands, knuckles pale against the stone surface. When he finished, the inspector stood in the front yard and looked at the house. "The emergency stabilization is consistent with permitted temporary repair. Documentation matches the scope. Final inspection is required before permanent structural changes are approved, but there is no violation of record as of today." He handed Owen a copy of his inspection notes and left. Clara let out a breath she had apparently been holding since he arrived. Nathan came inside and set his hands on the opposite side of the counter. He waited until she looked up. "He found nothing because there is nothing to find," Nathan said. "Every decision made here was documented from the start. That is why." "I know," she said. "It still frightens me." "Yes," he agreed, "but frightening and dangerous are not the same condition." She looked at him. "He is trying to wear me down. David is. He knows I have less money than he does, less experience with legal procedures. He wants me tired enough to stop." "Yes," Nathan said. "Is it working?" she asked. Not helplessly. She was testing something. "You organized the permit binder," he said. "You scheduled the engineer. You stood in this kitchen while a city inspector walked your property and you came out of it with a clean record." He held her gaze. "Does that sound like someone being worn into submission?" Something shifted in her posture. "No," she said quietly. "It does not." Owen appeared in the doorway. "Engineer confirmed for Thursday. Full structural report ready within 48 hours of the visit. We will have documentation in hand before whatever David files next." Clara straightened fully. "Good." She looked between them both. "What do we do until then?" "We finish the work." "At the same pace?" she asked. "At the planned pace. Rushing creates errors. Errors create openings. We do not give him openings." She nodded and turned back to the binder, opening it to a clean page. Nathan returned to the sunroom framing. Owen went back outside. The work continued with the particular steadiness of people who have decided not to be moved, not defiantly, not loudly, but with the quiet resolve of those who understand that the most durable structures are not built the fastest. They are built with the most consistent care. And that was what they were doing, one documented repair at a time. The open house notice arrived taped to the front door on a Friday afternoon. David's attorney had filed a parallel motion requesting the court allow a marketing period ahead of the formal hearing. The open house was scheduled for Tuesday. It was not an invitation, it was a demonstration of leverage. Nathan read the notice twice, then set it in front of Owen. Owen read it once. He scheduled it before the structural report is officially submitted. "Intentionally," Nathan replied. "He wants buyers through the door before the documentation closes his argument." Owen looked at Nathan with the expression of someone who had already thought 3 steps ahead.
Mechanics lien, he said. Nathan went quiet for a moment. Labor and materials on record at the county clerk's office, he said slowly. It clouds the title. No institutional buyer closes on a clouded title. No bank finances against one. Your invoice is legitimate, Owen said. Documented hours, material receipts, outstanding balance. You have not been paid for 3 weeks of work. That is not a fiction. That is a factual, unpaid debt. Nathan drove to the county clerk's office that same afternoon. The filing was straightforward. He presented his documentation and walked out 40 minutes later with a stamped receipt in hand. On Tuesday, he arrived in different clothes, a dark jacket over a collared shirt. Nathan noted this with a single raised eyebrow and said nothing. The open house had drawn a modest crowd, a few investors, a browsing couple. The listing agent maintained her professional presentation with visible effort. Clara stood near the window in a room staged with rented furniture and artificial flowers. She was composed but pale. Nathan walked in, looked at the room, and spoke clearly. There is a recorded lien on this property, file number ML241983, outstanding balance for labor and materials. No transaction on this property can close until the lien is resolved. The agent's expression changed. Phones came out. The investors exchanged words. The browsing couple drifted toward the door. David appeared from the back of the house. He had clearly been expecting a different kind of afternoon. You cannot do this, he said. His voice was controlled but compressed tight. The lien is recorded, Nathan replied calmly. The file number is public record. Verify it at your convenience. Clara stepped away from the window and stood beside Nathan. Not behind him, not requiring him, beside him. This property is under active restoration with full permits and a certified structural assessment confirming it is sound, she said to the room. She looked at the agent. Please convey that to anyone who received the listing materials. The agent began folding her display materials without argument. David stood very still as the open house emptied around him. Nathan watched his face cycle through calculations that were arriving at unfamiliar totals. What do you want? David said finally. My invoice paid, and an honest proceeding. Clara looked at David without the weight of needing him to understand anything. I want my home. David left without answering. His attorney called the next morning, and by Clara's account, the tone of the conversation had shifted considerably from every previous exchange. The for sale sign came down 3 days later. It had never been a genuine offer. It had been a pressure instrument, and pressure instruments only work against things that are not properly anchored. Clara Ashford was now properly anchored.
The 2 days before the court hearing were the stillest of the entire ordeal. David had gone quiet. No new filings, no surprise visits, no gossip posted anywhere. Nathan had learned from Owen, who had learned from years of experience, that this particular silence meant recalibration rather than surrender. He mentioned it to Clara one evening on her porch swing after the crew had gone. The structural report had been submitted. The lien documentation was in order. Everything that could be prepared had been prepared. He has not given up, Nathan said. I know, Clara replied, looking at the street. But I have stopped building my days around anticipating his next move. I am exhausted by living inside his strategy. Nathan looked at the boards beneath their feet, every one of them solid and quiet. That is a meaningful change from 3 weeks ago, he said. 3 weeks ago, I was standing on a loose step with a suitcase and no destination, she said. I did not even have somewhere to go. I just needed something to be in motion, as if moving felt the same as deciding. Did it? No. She pulled her cardigan closer. You fixed the step, and I came back inside. That was the actual decision. He looked at her. That step was going to drop you. Yes, and that was the first thing you said. She glanced at him. Why not answer me directly? He considered it. Because the most urgent thing was the most urgent thing, he said. You asked me a question that deserved a real answer, but a real answer requires the person receiving it to be standing safely first. She held his gaze for a long moment. Nathan, she said. Yes. Are you frightened by any of this? About the hearing, no,
he said. "The documentation is solid. The position is clear." He paused. "About other things, yes." She waited. "About wanting something I am not certain I have earned the right to want yet," he said carefully. She turned slightly toward him. "What does that mean?" He looked at the street. "Working alongside someone through something difficult creates a particular kind of closeness," he said. "I am aware of that. I do not want to move toward something that belongs to the circumstance rather than to genuine choice." She was quiet for a moment. "I asked you the first night if I was still worth looking at." "Yes, and you have not answered that directly, not once." He looked at her steadily. "You are more than worth looking at," he said. "You are worth building something alongside. Those are different statements, and the second one is the one I mean." She reached over and placed her hand over his where it rested on the armrest of the swing. She did not say anything further. Neither did he. The street stayed quiet. The porch held them both without complaint. They sat there until it was fully dark, and then she went inside, and he crossed the yard to his own house. Neither of them spoke about the hearing again until the morning of it. There was nothing left to say that preparation could address. What remained was simply showing up, which was something Nathan Cross understood well. He had been doing exactly that, steadily and without announcement, since the evening he first noticed a loose board beneath someone's feet and decided it was worth fixing.
The courtroom was smaller than Nathan had expected and brighter, lit by overhead fluorescent light that made everyone look slightly more worn than they probably were. Clara sat beside her attorney at a table holding a neat stack of organized documents. Nathan sat in the gallery directly behind her. David occupied the opposite table with his attorney, a man who projected practiced confidence and spoke with the measured authority of someone who had delivered many arguments that sounded more decisive than they ultimately proved to be. The emergency sale petition was the first matter before the judge. David's attorney built the argument efficiently. Storm damage, structural concerns, ongoing liability risk, a fast court-approved sale resolved everything cleanly for both parties. The judge listened without interrupting. She was in her late 50s, with the quality of attention that comes from years of hearing compelling arguments that did not hold up on close examination. Clara's attorney presented the documentation, the permit filings, the structural engineer's report, stamped, signed, and conclusive. The inspection record showing no violations. Photographs organized chronologically showing the full arc of documented repair. The judge read through the structural report without hurrying. Temporary stabilization was completed within 48 hours of the storm event, she said. Permits were filed the following morning. The licensed engineer found no compromise to the primary load-bearing elements. She looked up. There is no immediate hazard of record. David's attorney began forming a response. The emergency sale petition requires demonstration of an immediate and unresolved safety hazard, the judge said. That standard is not met by the documentation before this court. She reviewed her notes. Petition denied. It was procedural, not dramatic, but the words settled in Nathan's chest with the specific weight of something suspended for 3 weeks finally finding solid ground. David attempted one more avenue through his attorney: financial strain, shared ownership questions, ongoing restoration costs. Those are matters for standard property proceedings, the judge replied. They do not constitute grounds for emergency action. Remaining matters will be handled through normal channels. She closed the session. Outside the courthouse, David approached Clara before his attorney could redirect him. "This is not finished," he said. She looked at him without flinching. "It is finished in the way that matters to me," she replied. "The house is mine." He glanced at Nathan. "He will not stay. Men like him do the work and move on." Clara did not look at Nathan. She kept her eyes on David. "You left," she said simply. "He stayed. I will let that speak." David walked to his car without another word.
Owen appeared at Nathan's side. "Clean?" he asked. "Clean," Nathan replied. "Good." Owen adjusted his bag. "Finish lumber arrives this afternoon." Nathan looked at Clara, who was making notes on her phone while speaking with her attorney. She looked composed and clear, more fully like herself than at any point since the first evening she had stood in her doorway with a suitcase and no destination in mind. "I will be there," Nathan said. Owen nodded and walked to his truck. Nathan waited. When Clara finished and turned, she found him still on the courthouse steps, not going anywhere. She walked over and stood beside him. "Done," she said. "The petition is done. The restoration has another week." She almost smiled. "Of course you separate the two." "They are different things," he said simply. And they walked toward their separate cars in the same direction, which for now was enough. Walked through methodically, checked every repaired section, tested the structural elements, and examined the rebuilt sunroom. He signed the paperwork and left without ceremony. Clara held the stamped approval sheet and looked at it for a long moment. Then she laughed, and there were tears in it, and she did not apologize for either. The settlement came together over the following weeks. David kept the beach property, she kept the house, along with a payment covering every documented repair tied to storm damage during joint ownership. She placed the check on the kitchen table in front of Nathan. "Your invoice is covered with a margin," she said. "You do not owe me beyond the work," he replied. "I know what I owe you," she said, "but this is about what I want to do with what remains." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were property listings, old homes, a foreclosed Victorian 2 districts over, a craftsman bungalow with foundation issues, a small commercial building with original tile and a failing roof. "I want to restore properties people have given up on," she said, "with someone who knows the difference between a structure that is failing and one that has simply been neglected." She held his gaze. "With you, and Owen if he is willing." Owen, told the following morning, leaned against his truck with his arms crossed. "Visionaries or reckless?" he said. "Probably both," Nathan replied. "What is the name?" Owen asked. "Ashford and Cross Restoration," Clara said without hesitation. Owen looked at Nathan. She put her name first. "Because it is the name someone tried to take," Clara said. Owen nodded. "Fine, my name goes on the trucks eventually." "Buy-in within 6 months," Nathan said. Owen grinned. "Done." The small plaque went up beside Clara's front door on a Thursday afternoon. Nathan leveled it 3 times before committing to the screws. Clara stood beside him and did not tell him it was already straight because she had stopped wanting to change how he worked. Business came before they had finished announcing themselves. 2 inquiries arrived in the first week. A third came through a contractor referral. Word moves through a neighborhood when something real has happened. One evening, weeks into the new work, Nathan returned from a site visit to find Clara in the kitchen. She looked up when he came in. "Hey," she said. "Hey," he replied. No performance in it, just 2 people in the same space with the ease of something tested and held. She came around the counter and stood close. "Do you remember what I asked the first night?" she said. "Yes." "I am not asking that anymore," she said. "I know who I am now. I am asking if you are staying." He stepped back once, toward the open doorway where the porch step was visible. He pressed his boot firmly down on the board he had repaired the very first night. It did not shift. It held exactly as built. He came back to her. "I do not brace things I plan to leave," he said. She exhaled, then stepped into him, arms around his waist, forehead against his chest. He held her, steady, deliberate, without apology. Outside, Owen's truck tapped the horn once. The porch boards held beneath them. The house was not merely repaired, it was rebuilt. And the woman who had once asked if she was still worth looking at had stopped asking because she finally knew.